What's going on? So we've had a few folks ask us about our newest training program. This is for technical interviews. So here at our HQ, one of the ways we're trying doing new technician interviews for low voltage techs is with a bit of a test trial. So we give them a blueprint, has everything laid out. We do both handwritten ones as well as electronic ones, and then we give a general rack design. And then we give them lots of tools, parts, pieces, slightly more laid out than this usually, but we kind of clean everything back up again whenever we're not doing an interview. And my lead trainer is out right now on medical leave, so we've got everything labeled, whatnot. We also use this room for post-hire training to do systems training as well. Anyways, so then we look to turn them loose and see, right now there's a lot of blank plates because this is where people pulled blanks off and drilled holes to get through things like fire blocks and headers and cabinetry. We leave them things like flex bits and whatnot. It's interesting to see, what people do. How they run things, how they fish through a counter. Some folks will do raceway, some will do raceway, drop out of the back, go into a plate. Basically how they do it. Unfortunately, we find a lot that don't know what a J-hook seems to be, even though they are very experienced, supposedly. They don't run any J-hooks. We've got some attic space as well. We simulate some outside walls, require conduit. Always interested to see, what conduit adapters do they choose? How do they choose to do it? Is things straight, level? You'll see that's not level right there. This particular person, for some reason, didn't use a box adapter. I guess in a pinch, but all right. Just interesting to see, how folks do it. The goal is not necessarily to have a correct interview to go, hey, this person did it to our standards, but rather to see what their thought processes were. Have they created a bit of a service loop or service U, whatever you want to call it? What did they do? One of the big things is, I've watched so many people install racks just with a drywall anchor in, or just regular wood screws instead of GRKs or wall anchors. How are they doing it? On this wall, we classify this wall as a outdoor wall. So then we look to see, what kind of conduit adapters do they use? Do they use liquid tight? Do they use set screw? How do they do it? So it's, again, less about perfection. There's a J-hook. Less about perfection and more about seeing where people's thought processes are. Usually in a full day, people don't typically get the whole lab wired. But what it does is it gives us a really good idea of their pace. We like to kind of set it a little faster. Gives us a good idea of their pace. Gives us a good idea of their thought process. How many people take the time to actually use the label maker versus just sharpieing on the cable. It really tells us where their thought process is, how they're thinking about the challenges and issues that are coming across in the field. So it's less about doing things correctly the way we want to see it, but rather, are they just trying to gun through it as fast as possible? Are their wall plates straight? Did they use the vacuum cleaner right there to clean up after themselves? Or did they just leave a pile of drywall dust? Are they marking their things? Are everything labeled? When they go to bend their pipe, the number of pipe bender. If their resume claims they know how to install EMT. Quantity of people that are like, oh yeah, I'm super familiar in our written interviews, our verbal interviews, I'm super familiar with J-hooks, but yet don't use a single J-hook. Or barely know what anything is. It's like, hey, I don't care what brand you use, should be able to look at a J-hook and be like, oh, all right, I should probably use these. Or ask. It's not like we just leave them, lock them in a room. Our trainer's there. He's available. He's usually working on some paperwork or doing some other stuff. So far, I'm finding that this has worked fairly well. Unfortunately, that isn't clean. That's not really up to my usual standards. There's a lot of issues, but like none of it is too bad. We can work with all of it, you know? And so what I've found so far, at least, is it really has eliminated a lot of people from hitting the field that didn't have the slightest clue what they're doing. And even for the folks that are brand new to the industry, you know, apprentice level, I like to kind of see what's their thought process. If they're brand new, we'll run them through a full training first. But otherwise, really like to see where their head's at, where their problem solving's at. You know, the first time they hit a fire block in a wall, do they get frustrated and throw their tools? We've had that happen. Like, it's in training. Why, you know? We've had people just cut open a wall because they couldn't get down it. Meanwhile, the camera's sitting right there. They can put the camera down the wall and see it. You know, the number of one of these blank plates never was needed except for the ones down below. Those down below, those are where people have done drops. But a lot of these other ones aren't actually needed. They should be able to be drilled or fished. But again, I don't even necessarily have a problem with that if we see the thought process that goes into it. Why did they decide to do that? Why did they decide to put raceway or what have you? And so, so far at least as a company, you know, we've hired, I think, about 4 or 5 techs after switching to this method. We've interviewed in person, I think, about 20 or so. And we've done phone and virtual interviews with, gosh, probably 150 plus. And so far, unfortunately, I lose a lot more hope and humanity from techs that claim they do decent work. They claim they know how far, you know, 10 feet between a J-hook. And I'm like, you said you know NEC standards. NEC standards, you know, is not 10 feet. You know, we like to be closer to 4 feet. You could be at 5 feet. You know, in a ceiling that's tight like this, 3 feet, 2 feet. I mean, you want to keep your cable from drooping on the ceiling, from resting on the grid, resting on the ceiling. So it really just comes down to like how they're doing it. So a few folks, J Hobdy, a couple of others, kind of, it ain't nothing fancy. We threw up some test walls, not even all the way up into the ceiling, but they've got headers, you know, test walls, labeled all the bays so we can make it clear, you know, what bay they're supposed to be in. Like I said, this is our trainer's office, who also is a rock star tech. But you know, usually this is kind of spread out a little bit more, tools-wise, etc. It works pretty good, you know, for both the testing, and then, of course, once they're onboarded, once they're hired, it allows us to do, you know, actual training as well. Our trainer also helps with a lot of our pack-out, build-outs, etc. He's on our vehicle committee, safety committee, etc. So, anyways, figured I'd just hop on here, give you a quick little video of how we're doing it, some of the things you might expect if you're interviewing with Sprinter IT. And, yeah, so hopefully this helped a few of you guys. Love to talk to y'all. Appreciate it.